There are a lot of things to discuss related to what went right and what went wrong with our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And in a separate video, I'll provide my views on that. But one thing to me is clear, separate from good or bad policy decisions, the men and women who volunteered and served, and especially served at the execution level in the two conflicts, did an exceptional job. I think if they could look through time, the veterans of Gettysburg or Normandy or Iwo Jima would be extremely proud of the men and women who since 9/11 voluntarily answered their nation's call. Look at the Special Operation Forces, who essentially had almost 2 decades of really dangerous and physically and emotionally draining missions, almost nonstop. Look at soldiers and Marines wearing body armor, carrying light machine guns, pounding the ground in 100-degree weather in Baghdad, or at a remote base in Afghanistan, and often on multiple deployments. Look at ships in the Navy and Air Force units that made recurring extended deployments to meet the high demands of both conflicts in over 2 decades. And a little recognized fact that Air Force and naval units and individuals from the Air Force and Navy deployed to execute unique non-standard missions and tasks that had little to do with their regular jobs in the Navy or Air Force, but they did a great job. Men and women from all the services in combat and combat support units worked in really difficult circumstances, often making multiple deployments. And they were all volunteers, every single one of them. We fought 2 long wars without a draft, asking a small group to voluntarily make repeated sacrifices. And some ultimately gave their lives, and some were severely injured. I'll end on a small anecdotal story. It's a minor incident, but I think it accurately reflects a level of dedication demonstrated by men and women who served since 9/11. During my time in Iraq, on most weeks I had to go to a couple different bases, plus go to several Iraqi government ministry buildings. To get around safely, I had a PSD, a personal security detachment, with about a dozen military police soldiers and several non-commissioned officers, sergeants. And they were led by a really, really talented senior non-commissioned officer. Their job was to get me from point to point safely, normally in a small 4-vehicle convoy. Sometimes we flew. One day, a month or so after I got to Iraq, we were headed to the Ministry of Justice in downtown Baghdad. We got stuck at a busy intersection, a traffic jam. A lot of cars, a lot of people walking around. Not a place you wanted to get stuck. As we sat there, I noticed one of the Humvees in the convoy pulled up to the right of my vehicle, and another vehicle in the convoy pulled up to the left of my vehicle. I asked the PSD chief what were they doing, and he said this was basically their standard procedure. When we got to the Ministry of Justice in a secure area, I pulled some of them in and asked what they were doing. And one of the soldiers said they were positioning their Humvees to protect my vehicle from an explosion. And I said, so basically you're positioning your vehicle so if a bomb goes off, you get blown up instead of me. He said, yes, sir, that's it. I was kind of taken back. Here are a dozen or so young Americans. Many looked like they were just out of high school. They weren't paid all that much. Everything about the environment was hard, the weather, the hours, the threats. And they were willing to routinely put their lives on the line to meet the mission so I could get to a meeting. At the time, I was a loss for words at the remarkable level of commitment. And I essentially said something like, well, when we get back to the U.S., the least I can do is buy all of you a beer. And one of the guys looked at me and said, thanks, sir, but I'm not old enough to drink.